Are you ready to get provoked? You're listening to Can I Live, a show created to excite, ignite, and expose. Let's tune in with your host, R.W. Jones. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for tuning in to Can I Live's podcast. It's Tuesday morning, July 28th, and it is 7 a.m. And I just look just so sunny and ready for the day. So how about today you're in for a treat? Because I promise you, the information you're going to get from today, you're going to probably have to go back over and over and over and research it. So today we're talking about how and why should community leaders keep RAD on their radar. Now, some of you might not even know what RAD is. However, if you are a public housing community leader, a resident council president, vice president, a part of the board, just an advocate in the community, if you are a nonprofit organization who helps tenants advocate, if you are a minority contractor who goes after contracts, maybe those in public housing, federal projects, or maybe those in local state, this podcast is a podcast you do not want to miss. What I know, and let me just tell you guys a little bit about myself, what you probably don't know. I was first a welfare mom. Let's just say that. Most of you guys know I had my 4 children, and I was stuck in a welfare system that penalized me for wanting to become independent. And just through the fight for affordable housing, I think Dr. Kimmy is now joining us, but just through the fight of affordable housing, I was able to, work my way through, went to school, yada, 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 and that's a whole story by itself. But one of the things that I want you guys to know is I spent about almost 10 years on a housing authority board. So I was an appointed commissioner of a housing authority in North Carolina. And it was during that time that I actually saw all of these laws and rules that were supposed to be enforced for public housing residents. And it's important to know that when I come to you and I'm telling you these things, this is from things that I know for sure. And these are things that I know for sure people are not going to tell you. A lot of community advocates, they don't really know this stuff. They might know it, who really knows it? Like the National Housing Law Project, National Low Income Housing Coalition, those people that are entrenched with public housing law. Public housing law is a federal entity, so not many people are entrenched with federal law. A lot of the residents themselves are entrenched with the law themselves. However, sometimes even with knowing the law is not enough. You can know these laws, but if you don't know how to put these laws into practice, not asking permission, but putting it into practice, then you will still be at a disadvantage. So that's in a nutshell about me. So when you hear this information, you'll say, okay, well, why is she so involved and entrenched in this whole, public housing? So Can I Live in itself is a national public housing tenants association. That's who we are. We have members throughout 21 different states in the United States. And so public housing is our bailiwick. We try to stay on top of residents' rights, residents' concerns when rights are being violated. But I'll be honest, it's way more than what we can do on our own. And so we wanted to make sure we put this podcast out. And moving forward, this will be the trajectory of our podcast. We will make sure that our podcasts are more informative, educational for not just public housing residents, but any affordable housing leader, advocate, contractor. Why? Because HUD has changed the face of public housing. Most say that it's getting out of the business of providing public housing. And so for most of you guys who might not know, you may have heard of a program called the Rental Assistance Demonstration. It's called RAD. And in RAD, basically, it allows the housing authority to take debt out on their property. So let's back up. For 50 years, Congress has not given, let's repeat that. For the last 50 years, Congress has not given HUD, and HUD gives money to housing authorities. They have not given any money for capital improvements. So here's this housing, here's this these communities, and there's no investment to ensure that these communities can go through, major redevelopment over time. Just like any house, a house can deteriorate and will deteriorate over time. And so there has been no investment. Housing authorities have had to do the best that they could with what they had. However, they call it deteriorating of public housing, disinvestment. Congress has not provided monies to this entity in over 50 years, so make that clear. And so there was a need, there was a backlog of maybe $35 billion in repairs, renovations, that this huge entity, public housing, there's like over 3,000 public housing agencies right now. And throughout them all, there were more than $35 billion worth of capital improvements. When we say capital improvements, we're talking repairs, renovation, rehabilitation, things to make your housing stable, safe, those things. And that has caused the deterioration of public housing over years. Now, unfortunately, this is not, it's not, maybe not this is exciting as, police reform and, people out there yelling, yay, defund the police. But if I tell you that America's wealth was built on real estate, that's number one. Number two, when they built affordable housing and particularly public housing, all of that wealth went to white America, the good old boys. And here it goes again. Now HUD is into maybe their 5th year into this demonstration project. Now public housing, which is federally owned, is now being able to be owned by private developers. So public housing is up for sale. At the end of the day, it is up for sale, and you have to determine what is your role. Like, okay, it's up for sale. Okay, I don't have any money to buy public housing. Why would I want to buy public housing? It's probably home to some of the worst crime in America. So that's what RAD is. RAD is a deregulation. It took the laws down, made it flexible, made it where the housing authority can actually take debt out because it was against the law at one point. Good morning, Miss Dr. McTerry. How you doing?
Well, hello, Raquel. Good morning to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I had to breathe. I said, let me breathe. There's a lot of information that we're covering today, but I wanted to make sure I acknowledge you and say good morning and thank you for joining us before I get too further into it. I know today's topic is why should community leaders, you're a community leader, why should community leaders keep RAD on their radar? And so today we were just kind of giving a backdrop of how RAD and what RAD came to be. Sure. And so the rental assistance demonstration is HUD's program. And in fact, what I do know is when they were creating this program within HUD, I think his name is Greg Burns, George Burns. I think it's Greg Burns, one of those.
Right.
They were creating it in HUD. A lot of the consultants that were on the project to create this had to actually put in early retirement packages and actually leave HUD because then they had to go and show the housing authorities how to do these conversions. This is a very, very technical, complicated process that only a few know how to do. And while there might be more RAD consultants out there raking in the dough, what I know for sure is residents is getting the short end of the stick as always. And so when it comes to the rental assistance demonstration, public housing being up for sale, back in the day was against the law for a federal property to take debt. You couldn't take debt out on a federal property. Now you can. So if I'm an owner of a housing authority and I want to redevelop my housing authority, I can now go to a bank, and these loans that they're going to the bank are already guaranteed, okay? And by HUD guarantees the loans on these conversions. So there's a long process to where it has to be approved. And if it's approved, these loans are also backed and guaranteed by HUD. And so, private developers now come in. Now you talk about low income tax credit, because now we have to develop this huge property. So I want you to think of a local community, like a local housing authority in your area. Huge property that you have to develop. How are you going to develop it? All HUD did was deregulate and give you the opportunity to do so. and take the debt out. Now you have to go seek developers who really is the developers that have the contacts, that have the relationships with other private developers and investors who will come in on these deals. But the deal has to be sweet enough for the developer. The developer stands to win a considerable large development deal. That's just his percentage on his own. And so while he's out there saying, hey, we got this property, it's going to perform at this amount of money per year, it's going to give us a profit margin of this. Understand that it has to perform. Understand that it cannot lose money every year. And so what does that mean for residents? While HUD has touted, and how they sold this to residents is you're going to get a new apartment. And you're new, you know, like the rats and the roaches. Aren't you tired of it already by now? You're going to get a new apartment. And then from the new apartment, when you come back in, you're going to have a right to return. No hassle, no rescreening. You're always going to pay 30%. So again, no big deal. Sounds like a plan. I don't want too much. As long as I got my little nice old free housing, I'm okay. But what they failed to tell us was the economic engine that this will create for, again, white America. What they failed to tell residents was that there are laws out there that talk about them actually being a part of the deal, that they can negotiate and even purchase the public housing. There are laws, which I'll show you later. But what I want to make sure is, I got my little chart and my little notes here because I don't want to really miss it because it's a lot of information we're about to cover. But nonetheless, you know, whether you are in public housing, another thing is the Section 8. People used to wait on these lists for 20 years. With this new redevelopment, residents are actually getting Section 8 vouchers. And what used to be the golden ticket is no longer the golden ticket. Because now you get your voucher thinking, oh, I got my voucher. I was in public housing, now I got my voucher. I can move anywhere in the United States. I can go to Virgin Islands, Galveston Island, and just land. But people are not even taking the vouchers anymore. And so what residents also need to understand is before you take that voucher, where are you moving from and where are you moving to? And is the programs or the housing programs that you currently have, are those being afforded over in this new area? So let's take, for example, District of Columbia, DC. Now, I just recently received this epiphany about DC because DC must have the strongest laws for residents in the world. Like there are laws that happen here in DC that doesn't happen anywhere else. For example, tenants' opportunities to purchase rights. In DC, if you own property and you're going to sell that property, you have to give the tenants who live in that building the opportunities to purchase the property first. That's huge. And in fact, it's so huge that it doesn't exist anywhere else in the United States. And so that's rule number one, law number one, advocacy number 101. Any community leader that is in the affordable housing range should be in their local jurisdiction fighting for TOPA, tenants' opportunities to purchase. It's an economic, you want to change the wealth gap? You wonder how the wealth gap got so big? It's these kind of laws, and this is just one of them, but I'm just telling you that if you're in community development or housing, then this is one of the laws that you should be looking at, because why is it DC is the only place in the United States of America that has this law? Other states like California has tried to enact the law, but the city councils and them won't do it. And so if you have city council members, they need to understand TOPA. You need to bring TOPA to them. They need to continue to bring TOPA to, and don't support a candidate that won't support TOPA. I don't care if it's a mayor. I don't care if it's a governor. I don't care if it's a city council. Any representative that will not support TOPA, you should not support them because they don't support you. So on that, I'm gonna pause right there. I don't know if you guys, and you're in North Carolina, so I know you guys do not have TOPA for sure. Them folks out there be trying to, they probably would reenact slavery if they could.
Well, of course, yeah, North Carolina is definitely a slave state. And I say slave state, I did not say former slave state. I said slave state.
Oh, yeah. plantation politics 101 is North Carolina.
Plantation politics. Oh yeah, the Good Old Boy Network. Of course, we here in some of the major cities, we're experiencing gentrification as well, which is the heist. And make no mistake about it. This is post-colonialism that we are currently existing in. Most people say colonialism, they think about, George Washington with, wig and fluffy collars and
I want a George Washington wig.
Oh yeah.
I just don't want it to mess up my hair. I want to get one for the little fliggies. But go ahead. I told you, I really did tell you go pick some George Washington wigs and gavels.
Hey, it's the forefathers. What can you say? But you look at the fact of what is colonialism, and colonialism is the ability for one to settle in an area and pretty much take over by expansion and changing the political, the economic layout of a given region. Mm-hmm. And so that tactic does not care who is in its way. It doesn't care who it offends. And unfortunately, in this issue, we're talking about classism. We're talking about the poor and the broken.
And the fact that there is always enmity between the rich and the poor. Like, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I know for sure, for all my believers out there, the word says, what you do to the least of them, you do unto me. Like, God is very concerned with how we treat the least of those in the communities and in our society. That's a thing.
I think I've always marveled at one of the quotes that you give when you say, if the
misery of the poor be not caused by nature, but by our institutions, then great is our sin. And that's Charles Darwin.
Charles Darwin, good old Charles. Charles said it. He said, if the misery of the poor is not caused by nature, but by our institutions, then great is our sin. We really need to take a look and define what it is we're dealing with. Are we creating? And the Bible does say, the poor you will have with you always. But I'm looking at various cultures who somehow or another escape poverty. I don't see the Asians. I don't see the Indians from India. I'm not talking about Native Americans. I'm talking about Asians. I'm talking about Indians that are outside begging. I don't even see many Africans that are outside begging from day to day.
But let me ask you this. So this is where I kind of get sometimes lost, because I see community advocates out there all the time, and God bless them for all that they have done. The old guard, the old regime, they have done a good job in, I don't want to say good, great, bad, or whatever. I'm not going to dishonor what they've done. Mm-hmm. But there's some things that have been left out for sure, because these kind of things that we're talking about today in this particular podcast, you will not see this information promulgated out in the public community. You don't see it touted. You don't see city council, men running for city council and their banners. I think we just sometimes like to just get out there and say things that sound good, but a lot of us are not even willing to do the work that it takes and is required to see it come to pass. And so then we get mad, shout, scream, want to march. Like, my thing is, okay, we want to march, but none of us, have we even decided to work together as a people to get into some of these trenches? Some people know where these potholes are, and they are part of families. They are part of churches. They are part of associations. They are part of clubs and businesses. So you telling me that we can't get this stuff together? Like, even if in Raleigh or DC, we've been doing this for a long time. I just been here in DC, not even 3-4 years. And so this ain't new stuff. This stuff been around for 50 years. Right. So where have we fell short in making sure, oh, what is it, reading and writing? Oh, it's too difficult. Oh, I don't understand. What is it? I'm trying to understand what it is. Why have we not, as advocates, stepped up to the plate to really step in? Because I'm going to be honest with you, Caucasians, I have a lot of Caucasian folks that I really, truly, dearly love. But it is so sickening to continue to see them all the time getting the lion's share, all the time out there having access. Yet our groups, resident-led groups, don't have access. Minority groups don't have access. And it's like, that's okay. That's not okay. It's not okay.
Well, I do agree with you, Raquel. However, as an advocate, what I found is, this continual pendulum that swings back and forth and never around. And I think we get into this rat race of delivery and deliverance. And what I mean by that is that I think we are at such a point of crisis. That's where most of the advocates fight.
True.
They fight from the crisis and they never fight from the root.
True.
And when you talk about, so say for instance, we talked about public housing or even public schools for that matter. We'll talk about making sure every child has decent education, but we won't talk about the system that created the disenfranchisement in the first place. So we're always pretty much chasing the tail of the enemy versus cutting off the head.
Okay. And so with that being said, this particular podcast is talking about that information. Like, we're going to take our information and put it to the forefront. We're not going to chase anything. We're not going to tout about affordable housing. We're going to take the information, put it right in the front.
And then we have an action to do, because the other issue is I've seen most of legislators who get into office, they try to legislate a problem or they pacify a problem. They never address the real issue. So you can continue to give public housing. You can make sure the children have somewhere to eat, somewhere to stay, and give them quote unquote education. But you never address the routines year after year of those who perpetuate creating the defeat that goes along with it. So, we've done on our own occasion dealing with public housing and the rats, the roaches, or miseducation or lack thereof.
So who would be responsible? Would it be HUD? Would it be Congress? Or would it be the American people that allow Congress to not do its job?
I like to always stay within foundation. I think let the weak say I'm strong, but he also said let the strong bear the infirmities of the weak. And when you're talking about feeble or broken people, you have to be the nurturers. You have to make sure that you cultivate until they can come up to par. And I think that's a part of discipleship. I think we leave people alone. We give them things or we give them charity and we leave them alone. And that's where the exploitation begins.
Yeah, but wait, let's go back into, because I don't want to get too far off track, because I know how we can go so deep on another side. I want to keep us focused on who's responsible. So if we're saying someone is responsible for this particular wealth gap, and let's say this wealth gap in affordable housing, particularly how the lion's share of the wealth, America's wealth built on real estate, has gone to white America. Who's responsible? When we're talking HUD, okay, HUD is the overseer. They provide the oversight. They provide the policies. Congress makes the laws. HUD creates the policies that won't usurp the law, but will make the law stronger and more protective for the tenants. However, Congress are still representatives in our local jurisdictions that are supposed to work for us. And we're the ones that voting them in. So either it's our not voting or our voting. Now, we could go back and know that, of course, the whole dang system is rigged because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party both will, pick and choose who they want. But keep in mind that these elections are supported by major developers, attorneys, real estate attorneys, all kind of attorneys. So when you want to really see who's running the show,
your special interest teams,
your special interest. So if you understand who's running the show, then you cannot expect to see anything different from the landscape we have. And I don't think that that's what the reality is. If I'm running for office, I have to then choose or elect where, and I love DC. I love DC. DC even got a law where if you decide to take no money from a developer, they got a matching fund for you. For every dollar you raise, they give you $1. For you to level the playing field for people who want to run for office. Shit, I might run for office one day messing around with that because, and who's to say you'll win or not, but just understand that the developers are the ones. So let's get back to RAD real quick, because what's the big deal? We said, why should you, all community leaders, what do you need to know about RAD? Why is this a thing, and why is this an economic game changer? Number one, what HUD didn't tell you and what housing authorities won't tell you is that RAD is a huge economic, not a distiller, but I want to say a leveler. And so what happens with the RAD deal, remember, I think on my little snippet, I say, first of all, if you're in a community leader and you see that there's redevelopment coming into your area, the chances of you're late to the game, you're late to the show. It already happened. It's like when the circus, you get the invitation that says the circus is coming to town. Once you get the date that the circus is there, boo, they've been practicing behind the pit for like the last year. The circus is here and it's happening, whether you buy a ticket or not. Yeah. And so one of the things that we need to make sure we understand is, how do I get ahead of this? So if there's no redevelopment in your area right now, if you have not had any flyers going up in your community about redevelopment, you still might be late to the game, because just because they don't have the flyers out don't mean that they won't have them out in the next few months. You have to, as any resident leader, I don't care who you are, if you're a minority contractor and you're looking for access to capital, access to get in on this action, you need to be pulling the housing authority's annual and 5-year plan. And actually, do I have a copy? Let me share my screen. I actually have a copy of the annual or 5-year plan. Let's see. We're going to go over this in a minute. But this is just a sample of the annual plan. And the annual plan, it asks a series of questions, nothing too complicated, but it does say for sure whether or not, does the PHA intend to undertake any new activities related to the following PHA's current fiscal year? It says yes or no. Do you plan to have any demolition or disposition? So this housing authority said no. So, okay, fine. Then there's another question here, number B6. Did the RAD board provide comments to the RHA plan? And so if yes, comments must be submitted by the housing authority. And then they put in here, a meeting with the RAB is scheduled for February 5th. Their comments will be summarized here, provided. Now, what they won't tell you is that during this meeting, let me stop sharing. What they won't tell you is that during this meeting, you thinking you just having a meeting. They're going to get you some nice little croissants, some little chips and some cookies and some cake and some juice. And you're going to go down there and they're just going to have a meeting and tell you about a plan that's coming. And the plan is you're going to get your unit done all over. And you just get totally swiped up in the fact that, those are facts. Those things will happen. But they do not tell you, okay? And that's what I needed to pull. That we'll probably pull that next week. We'll go deeper because you can't get all this stuff done. But what they didn't tell you is that you had a right to purchase. And so let me share my screen again real quick, because here, if I just happen to go back, did I share it? Okay. So if I go back, is this it? So resident opportunities to purchase. This is the 24 CFR. That's the Code of Federal Regulation 970. It says right here that PHAs must, not shall, may. You must consult with residents who will be affected by the proposed action with respect to all demolition and disposition applications. The PHA must provide with this application evidence that the application was developed in consultation with residents who would be affected by the proposed action. Any resident organization for the development, PHA-wide resident organizations that will be affected, and the Resident Advisory Board. The PHA must also submit copies of any written comments submitted to the PHA and any evaluation that the PHA has made. That's one. Number two, resident organizations offer to sell. In a situation where the PHA applies to dispose of the development portion of their housing community, the PHA shall, in appropriate circumstances, initially offer the property proposed for disposition to eligible resident organizations or eligible resident management corporations or to a nonprofit acting on behalf of residents, if that resident entity has expressed an interest in purchasing the property for continued use as low-income housing. Now, what we don't know is that housing authorities have been checking a box, and that's the application I will show next time. How do housing authorities get away with not providing the offer to purchase? It is because they waive our rights. And so they're waiving the rights of tenants to purchase. And it's a loophole that HUD allows housing authorities to do in the event if the housing authority's community or new development is going to still be considered affordable housing. But it just said that if we're going to continue at affordable housing, we should have the rights to purchase. However, housing authorities are not. I promise you, there's not one housing authority in this United States who have told residents that they have a right to purchase, but we will be waiving your right because we're going to keep it affordable. So that conversation is never being had. So I don't know, when it comes to consultation, how are you consulting residents on a right to purchase or on the full aspects of demolition disposition if you're not giving residents the full knowledge and information? Which is why this podcast and other podcasts to follow is important, because we have to get this information out there. Community leaders such as yourself, Kim, you guys need to know this. And if not you, people like Diane Powell who are out there trying to, get affordable housing, this is where the money is. Because guess what? I don't have to ask your permission. I'm just going to follow the law. And then I'm going to hold you accountable. And so while I know that if I have the rights to purchase and I'm a resident organization, I'm not asking your permission. I'm just going to enact the law like we enacted the bill last week. We're just going to go and enact it. And that means that I need to be knowledgeable and aware of all of these things. And so, if you have a housing group or an affordable housing, coalition, association, council, and you need to know more of these laws, www.canilive University. We have a course coming this fall for community leaders so that they can begin to learn all of these entrenched policies. They're really kind of like silent ghosts that no one really ever pays attention to. But if you knew it and then knew how to exercise and implement it, you would have all withstanding from a federal level, not necessarily even state, from a federal level.
Absolutely. Let me just say this too, knowledge is power. And you ask yourself, who is responsible? Well, of course, those who are over or who are caretakers of those who have this population in their care. You would think that HUD would be responsible for making sure their population gets this information first, and that is drilled down, and that just like you are providing a teaching, a course on this particular information, that HUD is making an effort, a concerted effort to make sure. But obviously, there is a disconnect between these bureaucracies and the population that they serve.
Absolutely.
And really what it sounds like is either the bureaucracies are just as disconnected or content in looking at the situation of not developing wealth, keeping the people in the same mindset, and not furthering their population to the next level. Or either they're part of the plan, the Democrat-Republican plan altogether, where you keep this chaos going so you yourself can keep a job. How many?
True. True. I mean, that's fact. And it is HUD's responsibility. And I want us to make sure, sometimes you always used to have this comment that we would do better. And I've seen in the newspaper, if you really knew who your enemy was, you probably do a better job at really coming up with your solution, because sometimes you'll be in thinking you have a solution and go right to the enemy to talk to them about your solution, and they looking at you and they will rock you to sleep. They will gently, how about you, let's go, let's come here, you come to this meeting here, I want to invite you, and they will, before you know, you exhausted and broke at the same time.
Exactly. And the same mouth, the hand that feeds you is the one that steals from you. So, I remember as an advocate out here on the street, it has been very disheartening for parents to even have to call the law on their children, because they don't know. I've heard people say, I don't know if I even want to call the law on my children, because I don't know what's going to happen to my child in the hands of police officers. Well, that's just not in one facet of America. That's through and through. We're looking at a system that is designed to keep people oppressed. And the only way that you can get out is to shake yourself, almost yourself. You're going to have to break free. Nobody's going to set you free. You're going to have to break free. And that's what leaving the plantation is. It is actually removing yourself wholeheartedly. And once you get that mindset, you become a force to be reckoned with. And the people who are handing you the goods are the ones you're almost going to have to snatch your goods from. It is a huge, this is a huge lesson learned, is that I think we've asked this democratic process to be, and I think even last week, you talked about how these bills sort of get initiated and they sit out there in the middle of nowhere, and you almost can expect that nothing is going to come of that.
Now, what I would tell you is the Democrats created these bills. These are Democratic bills for sure. And so it's like, what do they say? Take one of the lesser evils, and my God, it's like shun the whole appearance of it, have nothing to do with either one. However, just understand that these laws that were created by Democratic regimes, and they sound good, but what people also need to know is that they're also loopholes. Most laws always have a loophole. And it's those who practice this stuff every day, they know the loophole, and then therefore they're exercising those loopholes. We don't know the loopholes. So like I had a call this week from a group in Florida, and they're trying to negotiate their RAD deal. And, I'm like, okay, well, we don't get money just to get money. So if I had to tell you, like you just said, snatch it back, while these loopholes exist, it's our job to go back and say, nah, I'm going to take that off the table. But there's a way you take it off the table. You don't show up unprepared and not knowledgeable. You have to show up ready and diligent, that you've done your homework and you have your partners to the table. And so one of the things I want to make sure that residents know is, first of all, locate all the minority developers that you can. Go to an association or some type of membership, Black Chamber. Find the Black developers, the African American developers. And just because they're Black don't mean that they for you either. So you're going to have to weed them out too. And I have had great white developers. So I don't want to make this a Black or white thing. I want to make this a heart thing. You have to find developers that have the heart of the people. And mission-driven landlords, whatever you want to call them, it is these individuals that will help make sure that you get a piece of the pie. Then you have to find some attorneys in the area, because they're going to help frame up your agreement. When you go to that table, and here's another thing, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Here is a tax credit application. What most people don't know is any development of affordable housing that is being built, number one, will have tax credits attached to it. And if it has a tax credit attached to it, it's called the Qualified Allocation Plan, CAP, I don't know how they pronounce it. But you need to find out who manages your tax credit applications. Usually it's a community finance agency in the area that is solely responsible for managing and allocating these tax properties or tax application, approving the tax application. But there is a prioritizing scoring, and usually, as you can see here, resident services plan. There's 3 points that's given. Now, I don't know if that's by law, but I would be first advocating to make sure that we get more points on the resident services plan. But guess what? Nonetheless, when you submit a tax credit application, everybody needs to submit a resident services plan. And so that developer is going to either have to say, we will provide the resident services directly, meaning we're going to pay for it directly, provided directly or indirectly, where we'll pay a person to coordinate services for somebody. But either way, you cannot get a tax application through, and you shouldn't be, without no resident services. So that is our foot right there. If you are a resident group, resident council organization, you don't just show up and say, oh, I want the money because I'm a resident management corporation. No, it's a partnership. If you're saying that you want to show up as an equity partner, that's important too. You don't get money just because you're a resident group. No, you have to negotiate a stake in the equity deal. And so if the deal is, $22 million, you have to then negotiate you as a partner in this equity deal. So I'm going to get my minority partners. I'm going to get my attorneys. I'm going to get us all of the people that we need to, and come up with the resident service plan. Here's the resident service plan. We will institute the resident service plan. And this has been done successfully a lot in DC, simply because there's TOPA. Now, this has been done outside of public housing. Never in public housing has this ever been done. And that's simply because other jurisdictions don't have TOPA. So remember, I told you, if you're a community advocate, you need to be really looking for that TOPA right, because that TOPA right is going to substantiate anything you have, even federally. But here we have one of the groups is a partner of ours, Columbia Heights Tenants Association. No, Columbia Heights Village Tenants Association. Their group, whoever negotiated the deal with them, they are now equity partners in the deal. So when the developers go to meet on a monthly basis, they are a part of those meetings. And guess what? When every resident every month pays their rent, and at the end of the year, end of the quarter, all bills are paid, all expenses are paid, and there is a profit, that resident association gets a piece of that profit. And so this tenant association and other tenant associations, they sit on millions of dollars. Now, that's a whole nother topic for another day, that you could sit on millions of dollars and don't even have a vision or a plan for it. That's disastrous. I don't even know what's worse. But you can now set up where your organization can receive $250,000 every quarter in perpetuity. And so this is just the negotiation when you show up to the table, that you're showing up with this negotiation that we want to have an equity. You're not wanting to purchase your unit more than you want a partnership in the equity deal. Meaning we're viable partners. And guess what? If public housing residents over the last 50 years have had to live in these deplorable conditions and have had to sustain crime, poor substandard living, rats, roaches, and what other kind of rodents you want to put, if they were and could contribute to your poverty status, why can't they contribute to your wealth? Why would they be alienated out of the wealth game? Why would you not want to bring them into the opportunity to create wealth for their generations, for their children? This is the promulgation and the perpetuation of poverty and the wealth gap. And so we're going to close the wealth gap. This is our job. Can I Live's job? This is our job to do our thing on our post. Our post is affordable housing, and we want to make sure we close the gap by sharing the information that we have to make sure as many leaders know of this information, because this information is where the good's at. It's like the treasure chest. And if you're not willing to, sit down and do the work, then you're going to miss out on the goods. Did I stop sharing my screen?
No.
It's still sharing?
Yes. Well, you're not sharing anything.
Oh yeah, I'm not sharing nothing. Okay. So that was the, the whole qualification plan, the annual plan. I went over that. What another thing that most people don't know is that every law, in HUD, there's a law called Section 3. People hear it all the time. It's CFR. Let me just share my screen. I can do better. It's CFR 135. Here's another law. You start talking about federal law, and I don't know about us, Black folk, but we start getting airy, dreary eyes looking into the deadlines like, oh God, you got to have an appetite for black and white. We racial, we want to be racial, black and white, but you got to have an appetite for law. Law, the tenacity, the words, the comprehension thereof, the way that it is being applied and interpreted. You need to understand how this stuff works, because this is where we hemmed up. We say we want reform. We say we want to stop all of this stuff, but we can't find in the black and white where it is written.
Right.
where it is written. We want to promote scriptures, talk about it is written. Well, where is it written in the laws of the land? We have actually, my favorite is Proverbs 2:9-2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people mourn. And so when the righteous are in authority, well, in order for me to be in authority, I have to have some type of governance, structure, framework, policies, laws, something that will say, okay, residents of Zamunda, this is how we this is how we will express our love for one another. You know, everybody in housing, you know, you'll never pay 30% of your income or more than 30% of your income in rent. Every 7 years, all debt is forgiven. You know what I'm saying? There are rules by which we live and govern the affairs of man. And in fact, earth was given to man to govern and have dominion. However, nowhere was it said that the wicked were supposed to make the laws and that the righteous folks were supposed to live under. That should not be. And so for all my faith-based, my believers, those contractors, those that have the anointing and the gifts of administration and leadership and the gifts of, you know, just doing business, you are called to commerce. You are called to serve beyond the walls. It's in the black and white. It is written in the laws of our land. So here, right here, it says very clearly, this is a law that says to the greatest extent possible. They call it Section 3 because it's the Section 3 of the Housing Act of 1968. And it was created to ensure that employment and other economic opportunities generated by certain HUD financial assistance shall, to the greatest extent feasible, they love that word, and consistent with all other federal, state, local laws and regulations, be directed to. That means flow to, appropriated to, be directed, offered to, be pushed to, be given to low and very low income persons, particularly those who are recipients of government assistance for housing, and to the business concerns, which provide economic opportunities to low and very low income persons. So in a nutshell, HUD has the laws that says wherever HUD money is spent, these opportunities should be afforded to residents of those that get housing subsidies. So how is it that we're still broke? How is it that this heist can come in? And in fact, you know what? I'm gonna do you one better. Go ahead, Kim. While I search for this thing right here, because I want to show you that on HUD's website, there's a fact sheet. Is this it? Let's see. HUD's fact sheet actually has promoted that HUD in itself has generated more than $4 billion and has created more than 150,000 jobs. But unfortunately, nobody can tell us where these jobs were. So let's see. RAD and NTW, that's moving to work in Chicago. So you can't let HUD be the narrative of this story. Please do not believe everything this stuff could be factual, but they cannot be the owners of this narrative because there's a different narrative being played out in the streets. And so if I know I have the flyer, so, but if you just Google HUD RAD 4 billion in construction, you're going to see a flyer that comes up. There's an image. I'm going to just go to the image. Is this it? It's a flyer. Let's see. Let me look for the flyer. Hold on, because I got the flyer. Well, actually, they updated the flyer. So let me go here and do PDF. Because you'll see here where is it? After RAD, before RAD, no. I have it. I'll just look for it. Is this it? HUD receives $4 billion in construction. I think that might be it. They archived this. Yeah, this is it. So $4 billion in construction achieved under RAD is in their archive. So maybe they just don't use this anymore. But $4 billion in new private and public funds that have been leveraged by RAD with an average of $61,000 invested in construction per unit. The construction activities has stimulated an estimated 75,000 jobs. When we called the Office of Recapitalization and asked them, initially before in the beginning years ago, they was really excited because they were like, we're going to be able to tell you how many of these jobs actually went to Section 3 residents, low income residents in the housing authority. And so maybe after a year or two, we like, okay, you guys, what's up? What the data saying? They were like, it ain't saying nothing. We ain't got the data. I'm like, well, what do you mean you ain't got the data? Yeah, that app or whatever platform or data mapping tool they was using didn't work, or they wasn't working, or maybe they just didn't want to trace it, or maybe they just didn't give a damn because they don't plan to provide the jobs. Now, does that mean that, oh, because I'm a little poor, little old resident, I'm supposed to get a job? What am I, you got to learn, you got to have skill. You got to be able to do something. I don't know if you want to be the one waving the flag out there, but if that is the case, bless your soul. Wave the flag with all dignity. However, if you have a small business in public housing, a resident-owned business, that also is an entity that is protected under law, under federal law. You and your business should have some type of contracting opportunity. And that's why we created the resident-owned business incubator, to make sure that these developers could no longer say that they couldn't find qualified entities or qualified persons to work on their jobs. You might do accounting, landscaping, janitorial, excavation, painting, plumbing, whatever it is, those jobs should be afforded to you. And so are they promoting these jobs in the area? Who knows? However, if they're not, file a complaint. Complaint form 958. Look it up. If not, take the course. It'll be offered in the fall on Can I Live University. If you go there now, you won't see it, but it will be up soon. It's a community leaders and advocacy training, and you'll be able to learn how to file the complaints. File these complaints, Form 958 with HUD, and then when HUD act a fool, file it against them. Go to your local, what's that people call, general attorney generals, file complaints together collectively, not just residents, but residents need minority contractors, lawyers to come together in this time to do this thing. And so, I know I done been touting, well, I'm on the move here. I'm touting, and it's still so much more information to do. So we already talked about the two, at least one law was knowing the TOPA. Everybody and every tenant advocate should be asking for TOPA. Second, every tenant advocate should know how to file a 958 complaint in their local jurisdiction. Teach residents how to file complaint. Just like we be out there trying to register them to vote, we need to be out there filing these complaints. Second, remember we talked about the tax credit applications. This is how you negotiate your deal at that table. When you sit at that table, you come to the table and you talk to the developer, and you tell the developer that your resident group will help with engagement. You'll make sure that the transition of development goes smoothly. You'll make sure education is aware. You'll knock on the doors. You'll help the developer, because somebody has to do that. And so you want to make sure that you are not just at the table as some entitled group, but you're at the table actually doing something that needs to be done, and doing it in an effective, efficient manner. And I don't know too many. Of course, they will try to act like and dismiss you and like, shoot, fly, you bothering me. But you have to be consistent. And if that deal goes through, file the complaints, get an attorney, and then, contact Can I Live, and together we'll see what can be done. But I think it is time for us, in the matter of Black Lives Movement, when we want to close these wealth gaps, when we want to close, and talk about reform, these are the areas that we really, really need to kind of tighten up on. So I know I done said a whole lot. What else we said? Every tenant leader should know about TOPA. Oh, also, if you are a tenant leader, you should also know about income discrimination. You should be speaking to your city council to make sure income discrimination is not a thing. What happens with these redevelopment, we talked about Section 8 vouchers being like the golden tickets. Well, go ahead and get a voucher, and then go ahead and try to move. And then when you are denied and you have a certain amount of days, you can get an extension. But after your extensions fall short, you will be moved back into the housing authorities into another part of, not the one that was being developed, but some other deplorable condition. So you move from one poor place to another. That's called segregation. And the mere fact that even if you get your voucher, you're not moving to Beverly Hills. Let's make that clear. And so the whole, opportunity zones, higher zip codes, you got a voucher now, you're supposed to be able to move. Income discrimination is just another fancy word. When they can discriminate against you because you have a voucher, to me, you're being discriminated because of your color. And the fact that we make up 13% of the United States population, but almost 50% of HUD's poor population as it pertains to these vouchers, we are disproportionately represented in these areas. And so these are the loopholes that we need to close. And I don't know, between the young guard and the old guard and the rebels on the street, how we close these gaps, I don't know. You just gonna let me keep ranting, Kimberly? You just gonna let me? Your phone, you muted. You're muted, lady.
Well, I think you've said a mouthful. I don't think you need any assistance from me. I think these are facts. This is a truth that we all need to be aware and abide by. It is time for us to take the bull by the horns, because obviously these bureaucracies are not going to do it. If we're looking for HUD to save us, they may be the incubator for the buffoonery. And so we're just going to have to break free. I think this is the year of not just 2020 vision, but also this is truly our independence. And independence means independent. It means I'm an independent. I tell people I'm an independent voter, so I don't do both parties. Mm-hmm. I think I talk about independence. That means, here's the thing. We're asking for our system to give us something that they already owe. That's the first problem. Yeah. And then they ration it back to us and
make it complicated for you to even get it. It's an abomination, and shame on you, all you.
And then they disclose pertinent information that keeps you needing them or coming back to them for your stuff. If they took a 2020 census and said that we have to have an account of who you are so that we can allocate funds, then just give me my funds.
Yeah. I guess it's the intent. No one ever really intends, but at some point, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to blame this white man no more. I know you want to blame the white man, but I used to blame him all the time. The white man and the devil.
Capitalism works for a lot of people more than the white man. I'll say that.
True.
Capitalism is it may be a concept started by, but greed and poverty, rich and poor, is not always a color. It can affect more of one color than the other, of course, because of the hatred. But classism is a fact. Racism is a fact, and we cannot minimize or even ignore it. But it must be abolished. It must be abolished. And so, like I said.
So I guess the truth, we just kind of keep putting truth out there. And if people are led to do the work on their own, do the work. Just do the work. I want to say, one of the things is shame on them for saying, like, we want welfare. We, like, you shame us for our welfare, but not to the welfare that white America is given. When they got the bailout, when they got, the mortgage tax credit, they get all these tax credits from the government, and it's the privilege. But when we get it, you're dependent on welfare. And so, everything in our world is always to reduce the dependency on welfare, on government subsidy. It's more of the mindset of dependency more than it is anything else. But we don't want your welfare. Keep your little measly welfare. We want welfare. Are you willing to share the wealth? Are you willing to make the wealth in America a fair distribution across the board? That's what we want. Wealth, fair, FAIR.
Let me say this. We want to be left alone. Maybe we don't even want any of those types of systems. When they arrived on the shores of what they call America, the Native Americans didn't ask them for democracy. They were just doing just fine with the system that they had. They weren't starving. They knew how to cook, clean. They understood how to manage their households. They knew how to go hunt and feed. They didn't need anybody to show them how to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. You know, we really need to stop playing into the market and the propaganda of America, because some of this stuff is just a blatant lie. We might not even need boots. We may need something totally different.
Yeah, and that's a walkout. So we got to walk ourselves out to that place where we can see what it is we need. Because trust me, don't tell some of these Black folks that we don't need this little white America, this little dream that they don't work so hard and diligently slave for years and centuries and passed on to their children. Don't do it. Not today.
Right. Your 30-year mortgage that you paid for 2 and 3 times.
Shut it up. Shut it up. This is at the end of our podcast, but we thank you guys. You will tune in next week. I don't know what we're talking about, but we're talking about housing. We're talking about closing the wealth gap. We're talking about justice. We're talking about righteousness. We're talking about all things that would alleviate the burden of man. And so, can I live? That's the motto. You know, we sending out our SOS all the way out to North Carolina for Save Our Sons. Thank you, Dr. Materian. Share this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast channel. Be sure to like our podcast page on Facebook. And let's just make sure that together we just do better. I know it's an hour, and we'll try our best to kind of bite this down into maybe snippets. I was talking so fast, I don't even know how I can cut snippets out. I don't think I said like 8,000 words in this hour. But we do thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week, same time, same place. You guys have a great day. Is there any questions? I didn't even ask if there was questions. We have some participants, and you guys can feel free to chat, but I know I done asked you guys all late. And I know we're on Facebook, so that's good. So we'll get it out there eventually. I thank you, Dr. Materian.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. We look forward to working with you guys.
Go out there and get Corey Branch and them to talk about TOPA. Get what's her name, Diane Powell and Octavia Rainey and James West and all of the old regime, Danny Coleman, all of them.
Yes, I will be pushing TOPA. What's this
TOPA deal? What's this TOPA? What you talk about? What's his name? Brad Thompson, Dan Blue. Yeah. Get all them old heads out there. Bless y'all. I don't call y'all old because y'all older.
Our elders, our seasoned veterans,
I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I'm just saying. Y'all got the wisdom. We might have some speed. Let's put wisdom and speed together and let's do something.
Yes, absolutely. I think they would be willing. At least I know the elders would be. So let's push forward. Let's push forward. Well, let's build the wealth.
All right, girl. Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.